Hi, welcome to Corruption Chronicles and Storytime with Hayelthkin. I'm Hayelthkin, and today we're introducing a new segment called Under Whose Laws? The Royal Proclamation of 1763 by King George III, My Rights, and Understanding of Those Rights Through My Indigenous Lens. We'll be talking about colonization, how it's built upon lies, deceit, and how that continues today, how it's built upon trade and trust, conquering through war or peace upon treaty or proclamation like we had through the Royal Proclamation of 1763. I'll be going through highlights and meaningful understandings of royal will and pleasure, the white flag of peace, those of who are and shall become inhabitants thereof, and how they confide in our royal protection and the enjoyment and the benefit of the laws in our realm of England, what that means to us as indigenous people, what public justice means, and the pain of our displeasure. And we'll also be talking about the Indian satisfaction, or what it means in the proclamation to talk about the great dissatisfaction of said Indians. Also, what it means about the letters patent and what molestation actually means in the eyes of the Royal Proclamation, and how the king expressly enjoined and required all officers, whatever, to protect indigenous lands, and what it meant for him to be Desirous in his proclamation. His desires are so important. We'll be talking about the honor of the crown in one of the segments, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Does it apply to indigenous people? Does it apply to me? I have a case right now that's being appealed, and some of the charter doesn't apply to me. It says we have protections against double jeopardy, but I've had triple jeopardy come up in my occasion. We'll be talking about the Indian Act, pre land code and post land code, or Indian Act nations. It's how it's a great idea, but poor execution. Can it work? Can the land code and joint jurisdiction work in the eyes of Canada? We'll also be talking about the Indian Trust Fund, what goes into it, who has control of it. I want to learn how to access it, what the actual balance is. I've heard 8 trillion, I've heard 9 trillion, I've heard under a billion. We'll get to the bottom of that as well. We'll be talking about the rights of Indigenous people, how the Royal Proclamation applies to us, our hunting rights, our harvesting rights, our fishing rights, and our land use rights. These are all big deals that we don't really fully understand as Indigenous people. We'll also talk about the imposing of colonial laws upon unceded land, how the Royal Proclamation is so important as a promise to not molest our Indigenous people, and the use of our lands, and the dereliction of our own lives. How the electoral system is a conflict of interest. It's an arm of His Majesty, yet it's granted the utmost jurisdiction over our matters, and our traditional hereditary ways is unrecognized due to maybe a lack of documentation. We'll uncover some of that. Do our laws have to be written to be valid? We'll talk a little bit more about oral history and recognition of the courts, what that means to us, how the implementation of our new laws are coming into play in the legal landscape that we're in right now. There's such strict oversight, there's minimal accountability, and there's lots of promises made on behalf of the crown on what self-governance actually means, and how they tote that our rights are superseding. We'll be talking about the natural person and the artificial person. The natural person is Hayelthkin. When I address you in story time with Hayelthkin, that's my natural person. That's the laws of ancestral language, and brought forward from my teachings, from my ancestors, from my guides, a whole bunch of different places, but they all come into play with Hayelthkin. And then there's the artificial person. That's the one that's registered to Canada. Eddie Cliff, and they're trying to use High Oathkin and merge those two together. And I'll keep them separate as long as I possibly can. And I'll explain why during that segment. We'll also talk about self-determination, the right to decide over our person, natural and artificial, the right to decide over our medical and our lives and our leadership, our choice in governance, who speaks for me. We have all these different organizations that are signing away rights and making agreements on our behalf, yet do they actually speak for us? How is our voices heard? We'll also talk about self-governance. These all might intermingle into one another, but I'll do the best I can to keep them all separate. How self-governance plays plays a part in our lives right now. Indigenous laws, the drafting of our constitutions, um, following the laws, the Royal Proclamation, the Charter of Rights, the Constitution Act of 1982, Section 35, the right to self-governance, having it proven in court. This is another challenge because it feels like we're being misled with the opaqueness of the crown to be able to take a lawful stance. What weight do our laws carry in the court system in Canadian jurisdiction? What weight are they supposed to carry under all the laws of Canada, including the Royal Proclamation? How Indigenous laws now infringe upon our rights under the Indian Act, Section 87. So they decided to change it. Understanding the shell game of jurisdiction. On one hand, they say we have full superseding jurisdiction over colonial law, like the right to taxation. On the other hand, says your laws don't mean much altogether, even though they are aligned with legal provisions that are set and agreed upon by the Crown. We'll go into that. We'll go into how fishing rights, what our fishing rights are, and what can we do under those laws, and under whose laws do we have to operate? Do we operate under our inherent right to hunt and fish and gather on unceded lands, or do we follow the laws of Canada where they say that we can't receive benefits from our bounty? Harvesting and gluttony, knowing what your usage is, sustenance versus survival, the right to live off your land. When do our laws not supersede the colonial laws in Canada? When do our laws supersede the laws of Canada? Possibly when it's unceded. That makes sense to me. And do you have a right to prosper off your land if your nation is run by an elected leadership? How do we fix this for our individuals? How do we unite together as sovereign peoples that are in our natural persons rather than our artificial persons that's registered with Canada under those laws? So we have a couple calls to action through this. One, understand your rights. Assert your personal authority. Stand up for your rights. Assert your rights. Become engaged and stand in your natural person. Encourage you to speak your truth. If you don't understand, you can ask the questions and I'll help you as best as I can to find the answers. There's a wealth of resources out there, and if you even learn how to use Chat GPT, they'll be able to answer some of your questions for you, give you a wealth of information just at your fingertips. But some people, that scares people, and if you're one of those elders where electronics scares you, then just ask me and I'll find the information for you. I'll give you a link to read or something, but I'll help in some way as best as I can. So thank you very much for joining me. Thank you for listening to what this next segment's going to bring for us. I commit to giving you truth, and if I don't know something as fact, I'll tell you if I know it as fact or not. And if I do know it as fact, then I will have a source to back that up for you. and I have no problem explaining where I've learned anything or where I've come from and how I got to be where I'm at. So please feel free to join me on my journey. I look forward to hearing from you, being engaged with you, and Gaelic Hustla.